Hi, my name is Hugh Aiken. I am the president of ASCC, a small supply chain consultancy based out of Reno, Nevada. I've been in the technology business on the supply chain side for over 30 years, and I've worked for companies like Digital Equipment, Apollo Computers, Sun Microsystems, Oracle Corporation, Microsoft licensing. And my focus has mainly been on operations, supply chain optimization, logistics, warehousing, manufacturing, both external and internal, engineering, Six Sigma, and order backlog management. On the peanut buttering side, it's my opinion that supply chain should have their own rhythm, heartbeat, pulse rate, call it what you may, and they should be specifically focused on the products that you're bringing to market, the vendor geographical presence and the customer geographical presence, and specifically the end customer's requirements overall. By peanut buttering across all of these processes, you might get some short-term wins on costs, but I believe there would be long-term losses on lead times, quality, future sales, and a diminishing return on costs over the longer period of time. In my opinion, you therefore need to look at the total end-to-end picture, taking into account all of these factors, and build a supply chain which best meets everyone's needs for both the current and the future. Sure, I can give you a couple of examples. The first one focusing on the peanut buttering comment. I had a customer who was complaining that our server lead times were not competitive enough, and they wanted me to cut them from 15 days down to 5. And I took a look at what they were buying from us, and it turned out that they were asking for over 167 different types of configurations, all demanding different test times and in some cases different parts and vendor support. And with our inventory at a premium, we could not afford to hold such a mix to support a 5-day lead time across all of these products. And when I looked at their profile a little closer, I found out the following. 70% of the configurations that they were asking were shipping at single-digit volumes to their end customers. And of the balance of the 30%, half of them were in high volume and the other half in medium volume. So I went back and offered them the following. 3-day lead times on the high volumes, 7-day lead times on the medium, and 15-day lead times on the single digit. They agreed, and they found that after only 6 months the lows were disappearing from their demand profiles and migrating to the 3 and 7-day lead times, and their customers were delighted not only with the lead times but with the predictability of supply. So here's a perfect example of peanut buttering a 15-day lead time across all of these products, which really in reality required 3 separate supply chains. Another example of understanding your customers' needs and requirements and behaviour was a Scandinavian customer who wanted our 15-day lead times on very complex servers reduced to 5 or 10. These servers were being built in Scotland and shipped to their factories in Scandinavia, which took 2 or 3 days door to door via trucking schedules, which they included in our overall lead time, which made things even harder. We decided as 2 companies to set up a 3-day supply chain workshop at their factory with a view to looking at the overall supply from our factory to theirs and the time it took to deliver from their factory to their end customer. And we found the results to be quite staggering. We were hitting 15 days on a 90% basis from our factory to theirs, but it took them another 57 days to process and deliver to their end customer, which was a total of 72 days overall lead time in a market demanding 30 or less. And what we found as we dived deeper into the overall processes was that there was duplications around our manufacturing processes, whereby identical tests were being performed in both sites. Material was being added in the second stage, which could easily be inserted during the first. Software was being added during the second stage, which could just as easily be downloaded via the internet straight into our site during the earliest of stages. 20% of the volumes they had minimum touch during the second stage, and we offered to do that work in our factory and direct ship to their end customer straight from Scotland. And similar to the earlier example, 22% of their volumes were one-offs, which we agreed could be fully configured in Scotland and again direct shipped to the end customer. The end results that we got was that the overall 72 days came down to 37 inside the first 3 months, and then we got it to the end results were that we got the overall 72 days down to 37 inside the first 3 months, and then we got it to below 30 days after a 6-month period. The end customers were delighted, as were sales and marketing, plus the overall savings to our end customer were over 17 million during the first year, and as volumes rose 26 million during the second year. So once again, the answer to the solution to this problem was multiple supply chains as opposed to one single solution. Yeah, complexity is a huge subject in its own right, but I believe complexity is the biggest problem for a competitive supply chain. By complexity, I mean it can be the way you take orders, place orders from your customers, or the way you take orders or place orders with your vendors. It can be the number of SKUs that you're asked to manage. I worked in a company which had 16 million SKUs, of which only 3.2 were live, and the books were just swollen with the amount of SKUs and supply chain requirements in support of them all. The number of product offerings that you receive from the business groups in different configurations, the lack of calibration between the business groups and operations itself can drive complexity. The physical supply chain on its own can be highly complex, because it's my belief that you work away from multiple touches to minimum touches to make the most competitive edge to any supply chain. I think there's a place for insourcing and equally a place for outsourcing. I don't think it needs to necessarily be either or, because one or the other can drive complexity. The number of vendors that you work with is a major driver on the complexity side. The number of, for instance, engineering change orders that come out after product release, after new product introduction, can cause not only complexity but confusion in the supply base. So I think that the first thing that you should look at in any supply chain is where you can drive simplification, whether it's on the physical side or the administrative side or on the vendor side or the customer side. And my biggest focus from any supply chain requirements that we've worked on in the past has been to truly understand what the customer is trying to achieve, because sometimes the customers don't know what they don't know, and you can help them drive complexity out of their system just as easily out of your own.